Hi, my name's Emma, and I'm from the Yinova Center. As part of Menopause Awareness Month, we brought together a panel of experts to talk about menopause care from a holistic standpoint. Through their own modalities, each of these panelists provides care and education to help people understand and manage the physical and emotional changes that menopause can bring. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know a little bit about our center, as well as tell you a bit more about our speakers. So Yinova is an integrative wellness center acclaimed for its expertise in reproductive health. With 3 clinics in New York City and virtual services for people nationwide, we work in partnership with our patients to realize their full potential. We offer acupuncture, East Asian medicine, bodywork, and virtual consultations from the field's leading practitioners. Stacy London is one of America's foremost style experts and is best known as the co-host of TLC's iconic show, What Not to Wear. In 2021, Stacy became the founder and CEO of State of Menopause, a product line delivering rapid relief for people dealing with symptoms associated with menopause and perimenopause. In this new phase of her career, Stacy is doing what she's done her entire career as a stylist: help people from suffering silently, raise their confidence and self-esteem by alleviating external symptoms and removing the shame that surrounds them. Dr. Daryl Thuroff has spent almost 2 decades honing her skills as a healthcare facilitator and educator. She has a doctorate of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, is a licensed acupuncturist, and a licensed massage therapist. Daryl's goal is to facilitate healing based on individualized treatment for physical conditions, along with emotional stressors. The focus of her work has evolved into the emotional origins of pain, stress management, women's health, fertility, and pediatrics. And then lastly, Jewelbox, which was co-founded in 2020 by experienced medical providers Claudia Levine and Kate MacLaughlin, who realized an unmet need for vetted information, resources, and community around the perimenopause and menopause experience. Claudia is an internal medicine physician and Kate is a family nurse practitioner. They are both North American Menopause Society certified menopause practitioners. And as experienced medical providers, they both value an evidence-based, inclusive, holistic, and collaborative approach to care, and bring that philosophy to their current practice at the Marin Community Clinic in Northern California. Many of you sent in questions prior to this event, which we're really looking forward to diving into. If you have any questions throughout, definitely feel free to submit them and I can read them out loud for you. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to our panelists. To get started, I wanted to ask all of you, over the last few years, we've started to see menopause creep into mainstream conversation. Where, as a society, do you think we are in how we talk about menopause?
Wow.
Hey!
Who wants to take this question first? We were literally just talking about this before we opened up the seminar. And I would say that I think we are just starting down the road to discuss menopause openly, frankly, to share information, to collaborate, to talk about how we talk about, I don't even want to say treatment, it's not a disease, but how management tools that we can certainly use around the impacts of menopause. And, we were talking about the fact that it is amongst ourselves, that it is tricky to talk about, right? There are a number of factors. The fact that nobody has really, and, unless you're talking about the last 1 or 2 years, really been focusing on menopause as a subject in which we need to be informed about before we get there. That it would help us connect the dots to have information to understand what's happening to our bodies. And then I also think the added issue is that there's a lot of internalized shame around this subject. And some of that has to do, I think, with our conflating age and menopause, and that, it's sort of a sin to age in our society. And that's just a construct, right? Once we start talking about age for what it really is, which is opportunity and experience, then I think, we can take the menopause part and really say, look, this is just another phase. This is another iteration of who you are becoming. Just the same way we would talk to kids about puberty before they get there or as they get there, right? We make the mistake of thinking that, by the time you reach menopause, if you're reaching it through age chronologically and not surgical or medical, then, it's sort of figure it out for yourself. When really information is sort of the cornerstone of being able to manage anything. And so we're finally starting to see people like at the Yinova Center and Jewelbox talk about these things in a way that makes them manageable and understandable for the layperson who doesn't realize that menopause does bring with it issues that need to be managed and understood.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's important to note that we're not yet fully addressing the breadth of the of womanhood in general, right? Or just those of us who have the reproductive health of females. We go, like you said, about puberty is where we start, and we talk about this and we talk about that. In Chinese medicine, we talk about the 7 years of development throughout the lifespan. And there are other spots that we are definitely keyed in on. And we're at a point right now where all of a sudden people are being like, oh, wait a minute, I'm getting hot flashes or this or that. But it's not something that has been an ongoing thing that we've been addressing. So I think really engaging in that breadth from 7 years old to 14 years old and throughout, going from, oh, you are at a place in your life where your reproductive health would potentially say you're good to have kids, or you're, just beginning to get your period, or any of all of those things are all addressed, and very vocally. I mean, on TV, it's like multi-billion-dollar, industries on, female healthcare products such as, pads and tampons and things like that. Those are big, but we don't talk as much or in as much light as we would about any of that when we're going through menopause, whether it be surgically or anything on those lines. I mean, even talking about it from a surgical or medical or any sort of issue with that, we don't really bring up the fact that you're going to go through this particular process. It's just like, here, we're doing your surgery and we'll see you later. You'll be all right. Here, take this medication, or maybe don't take it, or we just don't really consider it. Literally, there's not as much consideration for women at this stage of their lives. And I think it's a shame, because preparing for it and then helping women move through it in an appropriate fashion is extremely helpful for those who are dealing with it. And also, as Stacy mentioned when we were talking earlier, for those who are coming up behind us in that. And I say us because, girl, I'm having a hot flash right now. So, you know what I mean? Like,
I wish I had cooling spray for you.
Oh, I gave it to a friend. I gave an extra to a friend, and she was just like, this is the greatest thing ever. So these are all things, and it shouldn't be so like, clandestine. It shouldn't be like, oh, hey, I have this thing that's really good. It should be like, here's a commercial that shows you all these things that you would need at this point in your life. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with going through menopause, because it's a rite of passage, just as having children is, just as getting your period is, all of these things, rites of passage moving through our lifetime. So we need to treat it as such.
And I think also in the sort of traditional Western medicine approach, we often are focused on illness. We're focused on symptoms. We're focused on treatment. And like the simple question, when I ask women at a visit, like, how are your cycles? How are you feeling? Where do you think you're at in this process? And they often look at me like, no one's ever asked me that. Why are you asking me that? And that, just to integrate the normalizing, like, we have a body, we go through puberty, and then we have this hormonal life, and then that hormonal life shifts. And that's inevitable. And if we're lucky enough to reach this age where we have, the privilege of going through perimenopause and menopause, then we should absolutely not have shame around that. We should be able to talk about it freely. And our healthcare providers, all of us, should be asking those questions before we're even aware that we need to be thinking about the answers.
I was also thinking, the kind of, there's an amorphous issue, I think, when it comes to the whole discussion of the menopause experience, right? Pre, peri, post, whatever, in that there's such a bio-individuality to the way in which we each experience this. So, we can collectively say there are 34 common symptoms, or, again, symptoms, another word that's hard to get around because we're treating it like an illness. But this idea that there are 34 issues that you may experience, we have no idea how long they might last for you, what the degree of severity will be. We can just say these are things that may or may not happen. And in some ways that makes it much more difficult, I think, for women to connect the dots, for them to understand that what's happening to them is related, so that like we understand that brain fog and food allergies and burning mouth could all be possibly related to our hormonal health. And it is really doctors and any care practitioners' responsibility, I think, in a lot of ways, to be asking the questions that Claudia was just talking about. How are you? How are you feeling? You know, we always, I think, just in general Western medicine, we treat what we see as symptoms, and instead of looking holistically at what is happening both physically, emotionally, psychologically to someone, in order to be able to judge better, like to have that kind of top of funnel view of what is actually health. Right? What do we consider health to be? And even when we find issues in menopause that can feel difficult, that are not easy, we still should be framing them in this way that, you know, as Daryl said, is a rite of passage, and that they may be hard, but they're not hopeless. These are things that we can absolutely find answers to, and certainly ways to kind of soothe this transition from being a rocky one to, you know, a much easier one.
Yeah. And I think having those conversations is happening more. I think that many of us who are now in this phase of perimenopause and menopause, generationally, we were raised in a way that we felt less shame talking about our bodies. And we talk about our periods and we talk about bodily functions, but not everyone is as comfortable having those conversations. And so I think that the more that we do this and we talk about these things that are normal and happening to our bodies, and that we talk about them in normalizing ways, and we bring them up in regular medical visits, is really important. And so that's something that Claudia and I both do, is talking about anticipatory guidance, talking about it before someone is necessarily at the age where something is happening, just being like, I just want to give you a heads up. These are some things that can happen. And so if something like that is happening, come back and talk to me. There's a lot of different ways we can handle this. And so even if, you know, we would love to sit with every person for 2 hours. And that's why we created the workshops that we did, so that we could have the opportunity to get that information for women. But the more each of us shares our experiences and normalizes what's going on with our bodies, the more comfortable we will all be talking about something that is normal. And it can be uncomfortable, but there are other things like birth that are also totally natural processes, that we also do things to support people while they're going through them. So we like to think of menopause as another one of those.
Well, I completely agree with that. I mean, honestly, it's like, you know, we have baby registries. I feel like we should have menopause registries. We should be throwing parties. This is a rite of passage. Yeah. And as Claudia said, it is a real privilege to get here, right? If you're getting here by age. And certainly if you're getting here by a surgical or medical reason, then, you know, it may not be within your doctor's purview to discuss the effects of menopause, because let's say if you are going through medical menopause because of cancer, your oncologist is worrying about your cancer, right? But it also really begs the question, why don't we have more support issues or support communities to go through this? Because I do think that, you know, there are support groups for women who are pregnant, and it's you know, women have a lot of shame if they don't have a comfortable pregnancy, or they're not glowing like an angel, or, you know, whatever. We have all these standards, performative standards of what women are supposed to be at any stage, and how icky the innovating for the darkness is, right? Daryl, you were talking about bringing this into the light. And I keep thinking of my company as a way to innovate for the darkness. When I talk about darkness, it's the things that we are afraid to shine a light on, but it's like the monster under the bed. You know, once you put the flashlight under there, there's no monster. It's just dark. And I think we have to, you know, just as Kate was saying, this idea of normalizing the conversation is also about meeting people where they're at. And, you know, there are going to be people, certainly like us, who, you know, are like Tarzan and swing from rooftops screaming about hot flashes and everything associated with menopause. And then there are people who are simply just not there. But that doesn't mean that the information shouldn't be available to them, or products to help them shouldn't be available to them. They may just come to the, talking about it in their own time. But you should also be able to discreetly go to your care practitioner or buy product without having to announce it. That's not the point. It's not that everybody has to be like, "Ooh, I want to share." It's much more about the fact that we want you to know that there are so many options available to you and that you're not alone. Going through this process can be very isolating. And my personal experience was simply that I started to feel like, how could all of these things be happening at the same time? It felt like a bomb cyclone. And, just the idea that brain fog and insomnia and night sweats and hot flashes and weight gain and food allergies and brittle hair and dry skin. And, I could go on and on here, right? When they start to happen, you can dismiss any issue individually. Any of these issues, you could be like, "Oh, I'm stressed out," or whatever it is. My anxiety levels went through the roof. Oh, it's because of this, this, and this. We as a culture tend to, certainly women tend to dismiss when things are wrong with them because we're caretakers naturally. And it takes a pause, pun intended, for us to be able to kind of reevaluate where we are at this stage of life. And even if you are coming to this surgically or medically, it is a moment to reassess and reevaluate what you need to do for your health going forward. So this, is a privilege, and it's a huge opportunity, and one that we don't talk about that way at all. There is another side to this. It's not just that menopause is hard. It is that it is an opportunity for you to reassess where you want to be physically, emotionally, mentally, where you want to be in your career. It feels to me like this is a built-in biological mechanism for us to actually slow down and take that moment for ourselves to reassess where we want to be.
Agreed. And it's very, I love what you said about information, because information in general, we all need in the information. We all crave the information. We don't all want to be out in the forefront screaming from the rooftops that this is what's going on, because of the historical stigma of, you're old. It's not necessarily that way, and people will not feel comfortable with it until there are people like us who sit there and say, "Hey, I'm going to be 50 next year and I'm struggling with this, but I'm going through it, and I want to be an example for those of you who feel like you can't put yourselves out there like that." And it's really interesting how we look at it like it's the end. I think I said this over the summer. We were like, it's not the end, it's just another phase that we're continuing on in. And that's very akin to the 5-element theory, which is what we consider from a Chinese medicine perspective. It's like a time of harvest. It's a time where we've gone through and we're currently in the middle time right now, which is funny because that's when things start kind of drying up and clearing out and hunkering down, and like you said, slowing down and enjoying this phase of life. And we need to get through those last hills and hurdles and valleys and all of those things in order to get over that hill and watch the sunset, so to speak. And it's not a bad thing to get to that point. In fact, as we are all agreeing on, it is quite a privilege to get to this point, so really enjoying it, not obviously the signs and symptoms that come up from it, but utilizing the things that we all have to bring to the plate for folks. Like, there are birth doulas, there are death doulas, there are all sorts of doulas. There should be a menopause doula, a little menopause fairy who comes around and is just like, "Here's your gift basket. Welcome."
Yeah. Welcome.
Right. It's important, because the more comfortable we feel going through any and all phases of our life, the better we are as we interact with other people. And then we are good role models for others who come after us, and we are able to find new information for others and really create this space that is healing and helpful and hopeful even, so I think there's really a lot to be considered in that. So hopefully we can be the beacons of light for people to get to this next phase and move through it gracefully.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even just the idea that, there are experts like the three of you who, come to this with medical knowledge and, just the facts, right?
Mhm.
Then there's like the idea that we can create a support system out of our friends, out of our families, the same way that we would ask for help in any other stage of our reproductive life, right? Where, you would always well, I would hope that all of you would stand up and give your seat to a pregnant woman on the subway, right? We understand that there are certain things that women need when they're pregnant, but we don't really understand what women need when they're going through menopause. We don't know the best ways to support them. Kids may not understand why mom has a short fuse all of a sudden, or your partner doesn't understand, or whatever that might be. This kind of more general, broad education for what a support system could look like, I think, is also really essential to making this a much easier transition.
And when Kate and I created Jewelbox, the foundation of it was the information piece, because when I was in my mid 40s, I started having all these things that were weird and were not typical of hormonal shifts. My period was rock solid. I didn't have hot flashes, but I definitely started feeling funky and weird, and it was stressful and I was scared. And I'm a physician and I took care of women, and I'm like, what's going on? And I, after a long time, figured it out and was like, wow, I cannot believe that I didn't put that together. There is something wrong with our system. There's something wrong with the fact that I didn't know what was going on. And I said to Kate, this conversation has to change, and we need to fix this problem. Like, we need to be part of the solution of how we spread information, not just about what's happening and when it might happen, but how individual it is. Like you said, Stacy, it's not a one size fits all, but to give people this broad sense of like what you might expect, so that when it arises, you know what's going on. And then the other key piece that we talked about earlier on the first workshop that we did, the first roadmap workshop we did, one of the women in the workshop, she coined the term like menopause. She's like, this is our menopause. This is our support. Like, this is what we need. And it's, and that sticks. And like, you go through the workshop and you have your menopause, or you create your menopause in whatever way you need to. But if you know you need your menopause, then you can go find it. And if you don't know you need your menopause, then it might not happen until way later. But like, just even know, oh, I got to gather that group. I got to figure out who those people are going to be for me. And it's going to look different for everyone. But the more that conversation happens, that we fundamentally need the support of each other, because we don't want to go through this alone, and we don't need to, but to recognize we have to create that for ourselves, that it's not just naturally there for you.
Yeah, and for example, having Claudia as a part of my menopause, and having gone through that experience with her, us developing this work together, I'm a couple years behind Claudia, and my moments of panic of like, is something terrible and mysterious happening to my body, was much shorter. It was weeks instead of a longer stressful period, because I had the context and because I had my menopause to talk to and be like, oh yeah, these weird and uncomfortable things that are happening. Yeah, they're really likely to be hormonally related. And I think having made those connections, having information, having people can really, really make all of this so much easier. And our levels of how we approach symptoms and our knowledge base really influences how we experience them. So having that knowledge can really make the physical experience much less unpleasant and scary, even if you're not, even before you use any tools to objectively change them. So that knowledge alone is so powerful. And then actually having tools is even more powerful.
It's funny because I always say, would you rather not know that you were going to be hit by a Mack truck, or know and be able to create a toolbox so that, you can put on your Mack truck suit of armor when it hits? And again, that's maybe a very, forceful metaphor, but it really just is to say, right. I do think very much, I agree with Kate, that the more you know, it impacts the experience itself. And I went into this experience knowing nothing. If I'm really being honest, I thought menopause was optional. And I didn't know this was
How does it become optional?
I have absolutely no idea. That's why I tell you, I knew nothing. And or I thought menopause happened much later in life, and I really simply didn't understand it. My only frame of reference, and I'm dating myself here, people, is that Edith Bunker yelled at Archie in All in the Family, and somebody was like, "She's going through the change." Like, I don't even remember Suzanne Summers trying to talk about it, and that was pretty. That I mean, she was really a revolutionary for trying to talk about it. But again, I think we come to these things when we're ready. And culturally, I think we are at that tipping point. I think we are finally there, that we are about to see the shift. I know that 20% of women who are actually willing to talk about it, which is not a huge percentage of the population, would rather talk to friends first before going to a doctor because they feel safer, right? And when you talk about a menopause, that's exactly what that should be. When you find products that work, you tell your friend. You don't necessarily want medication, right? Which is what was thrown at me. I was like, I don't want to be on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. How can I manage this when I know it came out of nowhere? And none of those conversations happen. Sometimes GPs, sometimes gynecologists, they're not looking at, again, that holistic view of the human in front of them. And I think it really speaks to the way that we have to treat healthcare in this country, certainly in the world, but definitely in this country.
Yeah, holistic healthcare is such a huge, important thing. And it's not one size fits all either. It's not just even in the idea of holistic health. It's like there are different appropriate things for different people. Like it's good to have all of the tools in your she shed, but you want to make sure that you're using the tools that are specific to you. Because somebody who is going through it from a surgical, medical, early onset, what have you, stage is different than someone going through it at 50, 55, 60, and everything in between. It can be a bunch of different things. Some folks love East Asian medicine, and others are like, no, I really just need something quick fix, and then having some replacement therapy hormones are maybe better for them. And some things are used short term and other things are used long term, and different ideas, whether it be diet, exercise, lifestyle, and or incorporating Eastern and Western medicine. There's no one right or wrong way. There's no one absolute solution. So it's really about taking a breath and saying, okay, I'm here. I'm at the door. I'm going to walk in and I'm going to go shopping for what is best for me. And I'm going to use the information that I get from all of that to help educate others. That's, I mean, for me, that's how I got into the work that I got into, and a big portion of it that I think is really important. Yes, I studied East Asian medicine, Chinese medicine. I've studied massage therapy. I've studied all of these things for many years, and I am continually learning and growing, not even from other practitioners, but also from my patients, and also from my friends, and also from any and all of you as well, because that's the big important piece of the puzzle I think that a lot of people miss, is that information is paramount, and we need to utilize it to move forward in an ease and grace that we deserve.
And
I
Daryl,
think,
sorry, Stacy, I just wanted
go
to say,
ahead.
to your point, like having a guide, like I view what we do as like, we're guides. We're all guides.
You're Sherpas.
We're all like gathering the information, like trying to figure out how to distill it into a way that's going to be heard and that's going to allow people to move forward. But finding that guide, and again, there's no one size fits all. And what I love about the holistic approach is that it really honors that we're all different, that there is not one solution, that we have to do some work, that unfortunately we definitely each have to do some work, but that when we work with someone, whether that's, you, Daryl, or us, or whatever provider you love, or whatever, even state of, like something that's trusted and something that's offering up information that's been curated for you and out of love, like out of wanting this experience to be the best experience you can have, that's when we all just that's when we all have our best experience.
Mhm.
And we talk a lot about that, like find your guide, find your provider. If it's not me, it's somebody else, but there are so many people out there that are doing amazing work. And I just wish there was one way where there was like that one click, that one Google search, and it was just like, here's everybody, just find your guide. There's somebody for you, and trust that you're going to find them, and it's going to be a better experience once you do that.
And just the reason, Claudia, I wanted to jump in, but I actually think you said it so eloquently, is like, I do think there are Sherpas. I do think, more and more we are finding doctors who are certified actually in menopause training. I really recommend that you look at something like NAMS, and that you look at providers, doctors, both, care practitioners who are looking at the menopause experience as an actual specialty. They are, they're out there. And one of the things that I found most difficult during perimenopause was that I felt this loss of agency. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do for myself. So the idea that there are healthcare providers, care practitioners, and information being disseminated that allow you to gain back your agency, gain back control, and for you to be able to then make choices in what you want your care to look like is essential. You cannot have agency without information. So it's very important, I think, because I felt this incredible sense of a loss of identity. I didn't look like myself anymore. I didn't feel like myself anymore. And I didn't know what to do about any of those things. And, there's the vanity perspective of like, okay, my skin is so dry and I want to peel it off and all of that. But then there's the real mood changes were very extreme for me. And, what are you telling your doctor? You're telling your doctor you don't feel good. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like, I'll write you a prescription. There should be more conversation around that. For some people, that prescription may be the absolute right thing. And as Daryl was saying, maybe you do need hormones, and I'm sure we can all agree the stigma around HRT or bioidenticals is really starting to fall apart with new research that hormones can be incredibly helpful and not even a quarter as dangerous as we thought. You have to have a very specific genetic makeup in order not to want to take them, right? So we're being presented with more and more options. And the more options we have, I think it does give us a sense of agency because we get to choose what works for us. And I don't know how you do that without that sense of I have choice because I have information which allows that.
I think that many people, when they first start experiencing symptoms and they hit Google and they feel like very overwhelmed by the amount of information, then a lot of people are like, I couldn't find anything. I didn't feel like there was information there. And one thing that Claudia and I have done is really done the deep dive, because there is so much amazing information out there, but a lot of the people who are doing this work don't have their backers to search engine optimization, so they're not at the top. And so really connecting with a knowledgeable practitioner, and you can find them on NAMS, as Stacy mentioned. And also there are very likely many really awesome, Chinese medicine providers and naturopaths, functional medicine folks, who also specialize in this stage of life. And finding one of those people is great. We did the deep dive on the internet. We made a curated list, which is part of our resource guide. And that's the kind of thing that we want to share with people so that people don't like in this moment, especially if someone is feeling really terrible, we don't want people to feel like desperate and drowning in sort of random stuff, the random internet morass. We want people to be like, oh, here's a list of like 5 things that I know are good. Like, here's a really great book about menopause that I can read. So that information is definitely there. And, there are people, many people who are super knowledgeable, available to support people who are going through this experience to make it so much better.
And also, I think it is a completely underfunded stage of life. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know because there's no funding behind it. And what I find so funny about that is we're talking really about gender inequity here, right? I mean, Viagra and Rogaine are probably the two biggest sellers for anybody, for any middle-aged male. And these are billion-dollar industries, and yet there's less than $20 million in funding for not just menopausal products, but almost no funding towards menopausal research. And to me, that's something certainly at State of what we want to be able to do. We want to be in a position to be able to sponsor clinical research. We want to be in a position to sponsor doctor studies so that we can help understand better ways in which to serve this community. I think, again, I really do think of us as a community. I really do think that we grow in numbers every day. And there is a reason that when we talk about this in financial terms, we talk about it as a renewable market. Every woman will eventually go through this. If you have reproductive organs, or if they are taken out of you, you will go through this. And the idea that it is just this like blank canvas is simply unacceptable. And resource guides like the ones that Jewelbox is doing are so essential. And the idea that you can only do this through sort of Western medicine is also ridiculous, right? We think whenever we don't feel good, we go straight to the doctor, when there are all these other sort of naturopath practices that can be equally, or certainly in concert with medical help, that are going to, again, allow you to feel a lot better about this transition. We're scared about it because things go a little bit kerplooey and we don't know why. The why is so important here. And again, to honor that why, right? To really ask it out of curiosity and wonder and not fear is a big part of this.
Yeah. So true.
Thank you. That was so interesting to listen in on. We had a lot of questions about managing some of the symptoms or side effects that come along with menopause. And they were wondering about ways to incorporate diet or lifestyle changes in order to mitigate some of those common symptoms, and wondered what your advice would be there. I know there's so many symptoms, it's kind of an umbrella question. I feel like, Daryl, you mentioned hot flashes earlier. Maybe if there's something that people can do to support themselves through hot flashes.
Well, there are a lot of ways that you can manage most things that come up with menopause. I'll say this: we look at the person from a holistic perspective. From an East Asian Chinese medicine perspective, we look at what is going on and we create pattern diagnoses. We do this with any and all situation that someone would come in to us for. When we're getting into menopause, a lot of times we're looking at, as I had mentioned before, there's the 7-year stages. So right around 49 is when it the yang energy, people always know the yin and yang symbol, and the yang starts waning and things kind of go awry. Imagine like your air conditioner breaks down at when it's not supposed to, and the heat just kind of it permeates. It's not like an excessive heat like a fire necessarily. It's more of like a smoldering, oh my God, this heat is like permeating out through me. And so we want to help nourish the yin in order to help cool things down, because yin is cooling and yang is warming, right? And is that the only thing that's going on? Absolutely not. It goes back and forth because there is a lot of that that happens during any transition. There's almost like that until you get into that balanced state. We are always looking to create patterns that reduce any dis-ease in the body. And I say it that way purposefully. And I say it that way to my patients all the time. I'm not looking to, snap my fingers and make you better. I'm looking to figure out how we're going to manage to keep everything getting as close to balanced as we possibly can. There's always yin in yang and yang in yin, and there will always be a little bit of all of that going back and forth together. So how do we manage that to help reduce any of that? So with heat, we're looking to cool things down, but we're not just looking to cool it down. We're also looking to help nourish yin and blood and all of the things that are going to help keep that balanced state, so that you don't go like a pendulum swinging from one end to the other. We're not looking to do that. We're really looking to help keep things manageable, with hot flashes, with inflammation, with sleeplessness, with all of those different things. And they could be happening from a variety of different patterns, but it's not just one or the other that's ascribed to all, people who are going through menopause. It's not just one and done. And like, this is how it goes. We do tend to, kind of start by looking at those things that are very specific to the kind of heat that could be happening because of menopause. But we don't just say, here, this is this one formula that works for everybody who's going through this stage of life. We say, this is somewhere that we're going to start, and then we are going to, really manage things based on how it's helpful to you. And this is the thing that often scares people off from any sort of preventative or natural holistic medicine, is that there is a lot of work to be done for it. Western medicine, while very valid and important, because if you break a leg, you need a crutch, you need a cast, you need an x-ray, you need all of those things. And you need pain meds for that absolute, pinnacle of pain. But there is also that holistic approach, like we've been talking about all along, where, doing things in a preventative manner throughout your lifetime. And then when this kind of change and transition hits, being well prepared with the formulas and the pressure, acupuncture, lifestyle, diet, all of those things. If you're feeling really hot, eating foods that are cooling, but also identifying what season we're in. Like right now, we're going into cooler months. So if you're just sitting there eating raw foods all the time because you're having hot flashes all the time, it's going to do a number on your digestive system. And then that throws everything off again. So it's a very fine line, and it's a very thoughtful process that sometimes people don't have patience for. And I get it, because sometimes I'm like, I've been to my personal acupuncturist a bunch, and while I've been trying to go through this, and we've tried a bunch of herbal formulas, one was really good, one was not so good, one was back and forth, and you get frustrated and you sometimes give up. So we try and really illustrate to people, don't give up on yourself, stay the course, use all of those tools that are helpful for you. If you need to use a crutch for some bit of time, that gets you through to the next phase of it and allows you to really kind of, deal with the preventative aspects of things, then great. Then that's what we're all here for. There's no one way or the highway. So, we're looking at it from, again, a very holistic perspective. So for hot flashes, yes, cooling foods are going to be helpful. Cooling medications are going to be helpful. Spraying state of that mist is, the cooling mist is.
I was going to say, that's all I got. I was like, get my cooling spray.
Yes, but that's a huge part, because that's one of those things that allows you to get over that hump. That's really important. So utilizing all of the things that we have really allows it to be a more manageable process.
And I do, I agree. Obviously, there's, again, no one flash fits all here. But, one of the things that I think about for the company is this idea of how can we help you in the moment, right? You may need longer term support. That may be supplements, that may be your diet, that may be exercise. But certainly when I think about hot flashes, there's two things that occur to me. Like I'm having a little bit of one right now. I can't tell if you can see, I'm getting sweaty, but I want cold on me in the moment, because really the thing that I experience before a hot flash is anxiety. And then when I start to realize that's what's coming, my anxiety starts to rise. And so what I do, this is just me personally in the moment, is if I can control the heat, my anxiety levels go down. So I find that those two things are related for me. And having a cooling spray, or look, if you don't have my spray, get an ice pack, whatever it is that helps you, just put it on you, so that the emotional connection to what is happening to you kind of in your thermoregulatory system has a second to kind of calm down. Because I find that anxiety and hot flashes are very much related for me. So to have an acute relief response is very important. Whether or not you can kind of decrease hot flashes over time requires much kind of longer term investigation and a longer term plan, right? That I think, like, Daryl and Claudia and Kate would all say is possible. It's just, I'm always looking for what can I do in the moment?
And that's key, because the moment, you know, if you can manage the moment, then the next moment you actually have, okay, I know what to do. And that's so key. So it's, again, it's gathering up all the tools. And, you know, Kate and I approach all management of, you know, of any sensation that's arising. The foundational management is lifestyle, and that includes nutrition. And there is no one menopause diet. It's really, you know, generally a Mediterranean style of eating, which is a diet that can be customizable to almost anyone's food preference or sensitivity. And it's really just about lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, you know, less animal fat, but like chicken and fish and meat are all fine, beans, nuts, seeds, olive oil as your primary fat, you know, less food out of a box or a can. But you can really make any diet in terms of how you like to eat and what you can and cannot eat out of that sort of foundational thinking about nutrition. And that's a key. The other piece is like exercise is so foundational. So we begin to lose muscle mass when we sort of enter into our 40s, which is often when this transition coincides. So not just cardiovascular stuff, because we need that for, you know, our heart and our bones, and we need that for just overall feeling good, but thinking about really incorporating new strength training and even just like switching up what you've done. So this can be a great time to work with a nutritionist or a personal trainer if those resources are available to you. And then also addressing things like sleep, because that is so foundational. And mindfulness, like some kind of mindfulness practice. Self-care, like the more self-care that we incorporate into our day-to-day, the better we feel. And then again, that piece of connection, like how we're connecting to ourselves, how we're connecting to our community, our relationships are so foundational. But really thinking big picture and thinking this is a great opportunity to re-examine what we're doing, like what's working, what's not working, what do we need to tweak, recognizing, like Daryl said, it's hard work. It's not like, here's your diet, go eat it, you're going to feel great. And then the quick fixes, like, you know, yeah, your amazing spray, or just recognizing I'm anxious. I need to take a breath. I need to like slow it down. And that's easy. Like that's a pretty easy technique to employ in the moment. But when we think about the bigger picture for any sensation that's arising, that's uncomfortable around this transition, when we think about it foundationally and all of the different ways that we can approach it, it makes it feel less overwhelming and less hopeless. Like this isn't going to get better, because there's so many ways to approach how to feel your best.
Absolutely. I would also say that for the eating portion of things, we often will look to eating for the season. And that kind of resonates as well from this in a holistic perspective, like how we're eating seasonally in the seasons of our life as well. So, you know, kind of applying that or employing it in that way. You know, right now we're in that time where it's cooling down and we want to add in warmer foods and we want to add in, you know, cook this, that, the other. We also look at that from where you are in your life in general, what other things are going on. Because a lot of times, like you had mentioned, sleep's an issue, or digestively, there's an issue where we're like, where the heck did this 20 pounds come from? I can explain, you know, I could sit here and say from today till the day is long that it's, you know, all because of the pandemic and I haven't been moving as much as I normally have, which is true. And at the same time, when we're in this particular phase of life, there is also going to be that kind of, you know, change in hormone balance that could add additional weight aside from that. So how do we navigate all of those different things and eat seasonally and sleep better and, you know, be active? There's an additional challenge now because of, well, it's okay to be around people, it's not okay to be around people. You know, we see a lot of things that are also adding to anxiety levels aside from the hormonal changes and shifts. So there's a lot to it. And we just need to really kind of take a minute and, like you were mentioning, really, sometimes it's just taking a breath, allowing some of that brain fog to clear, and picking one thing to focus on. because if we try and go do all of the things all at once, that could be overwhelming as well. So we're already overwhelmed. Let's add more overwhelming things to do. So sometimes it's just about picking the one thing that you could do. And that in and of itself is self-care. You know, it's not about going and getting your hair done, your nails done, or taking this, do that, what have you. It's also about just being present with yourself for a moment and saying, I'm here. It sucks sometimes, and sometimes it's a revelation, you know. So really allowing ourselves to I sometimes will put my hand on my belly and breathe into my hands. And my hands are generally pretty warm anyway because of the work that I do. A lot of it is energetic work as well. And I'll just sit there and be like, I'm here. And what does that really mean to me right now? You know, and then utilize some of the things that will help me get to the next moment.
I'll tell you what's really ironic is that I decided to do the most stressful thing in the world, which was like found a startup in the middle of perimenopause. So even though the goal is to kind of help ease people into menopause, I would say that it's been a real challenge to be going through it at the same time that I'm trying to build something for it, because it is so incredibly stressful, right? I mean, I'm like, oh, this is why 20-year-olds do startups and not 52-year-olds. But at the same time, you know, there's something, if I never believed in neuroplasticity, which I did, but I would certainly believe in it now. And that is the fact that the brain can create new pathways, new ways to learn. And one of the most exciting things about actually being in menopause while trying to do something completely new and pivot in a totally different direction from my previous career is that I'm sort of learning as I go. And this is an incredible antidote to feeling like menopause is taking me over, right? I mean, it really, having this kind of new purpose is incredibly essential to me, or has been incredibly helpful to me. And that doesn't mean you have to like leave your job and, you know, go live in the Himalayas. What it means is that, you know, this is a time to really think about the things that you're passionate about, that bring you joy, that you can add into your life. You know, you can't maybe leave your job if you're putting food on the table for your kids, but you can certainly, you know, spend more time with your hobbies. You can certainly pick up a new hobby. You can carve time out for yourself in a way that makes you feel really joyful about even the confusing stuff, because it's like just this curiosity and openness to learning. And, you know, there's a book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, which I highly recommend everybody read. But one of the most interesting things about the book was he talks about a study that was done at a nursing home. Almost everybody there was 70 plus, and they brought in, everybody got a parakeet, and they brought in like 8 cats and 6 dogs, and the amount of medication prescribed dropped 50%. And I believe that's because people need purpose. They need meaning, and they need something to get up in the morning for. And sometimes when you are going through menopause, you may not feel like getting up in the morning. And it is really important to find meaning and purpose in what you're doing every day, even in the little things, because I think it really psychologically just sort of helps shift you into a different frame of mind.
Absolutely. So true. I wanted to just say one thing. There's an exercise class called The Class. If you know about it, it's Taryn Toomey. There are a bunch of them that are really amazing. There's Anna Kaiser, there's Tracy Anderson method. There's all these methods. The class you can do on your phone, or on the computer or what have you. And they just recently put out, there's a class for that. And there's one that literally is like, I don't want to work out today. And I was laying in my bed in the morning one day, I think it was my last day of my vacation recently. And I was just like, I got to get back into it. I want to get myself ready. I don't want to get out of my bed. I just don't. And I was like looking at my phone, like side scrolling, and I see this thing and I'm just like, fine, literally angry, irritable, menopause Daryl, or perimenopause, whatever. And I just looked at it and I put the class on, and it was everything that you think you need. She was just like, Carla, I believe her name was, you may get 5 minutes of this, you may get through the whole thing, whatever it is, it's where you are, because, this is that class that you don't want to do it, but you're going to make yourself do it. You're going to put yourself through it because you'll feel better afterwards. And it was so empowering, because it's like, you gotta be prepared, be happy, be this. And it was just like, you don't have to do anything. Show up if you feel like showing up. If you don't, take 5 minutes and know that you did something. And I think that that's a huge portion of how we get through this point. This point. It's really all about that ease and grace and flow, and just be there and acknowledge where you are, and what you're doing is what you need to be doing at that particular moment. And
I do love the bite size idea.
Yes.
The bite size, and also just the idea that there's no more should. There's a lot of shoulds in our lives. I think particularly as women, you should do this. You should look like this. You should eat this. You should. Instead of, again, doing whatever you can and knowing that that is enough. And knowing maybe you'll do more tomorrow, you'll do less tomorrow. But this idea that we are held to such standards at every stage of life, and yet nobody knows what the standards are for menopause. We don't have standards. We forget that they exist because we don't know what the parameters of menopause are. So, this idea that we should feel like we did when we were, 20 years younger is physically, mentally, and emotionally impossible. But grieving for the person that you used to be is a natural part of evolution. And this idea that, you are no longer able to have biological children may affect some women. And there may be this kind of what I call secondary or residual grief from that idea. I feel like these are things that we should be honoring and not trying to skirt away from. Not that's not me. I'm not going to be that way, or I'm not that way. I don't feel bad. You're feeling bad is okay. Acknowledging that and then deciding what you want to do about it is part of the process, I think.
Each of the 5 elements has an emotion attached to it. We need to be able to go through all of them and feel them appropriately for each thing. If someone runs over your toe with their bicycle, you should feel angry, because that's a natural response. Should you stay angry with them 10 years later, you see the same person, you're like, you ran over my foot. That's not okay. You know what I mean? So grieving who you were at one point, like not being able, I do Taekwondo. I'm a black belt, first degree black belt in Taekwondo. I'm going to go to class tonight after this. I don't remember all of my forms. I don't remember everything. I can't do 1,000 jumping jacks like I did a year and a half, 2 years ago when I was able to do it to get my black belt. I'm going to go and show up and be the best first degree black belt that I am. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to do the same thing that the 16-year-old kids in my class are going to be able to do. I'm not. And I can be sad about that. I'm not going to remain sad about it. I could be sad about it for a minute, remembering how great it was when I was able to put my fist through 3 blocks of wood, but I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to keep going. You have to go through all of these different things in order to maintain that well-balanced cycle of life.
And
It's
I'd
also,
like
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to piggyback briefly on, thinking grieving changes. I think something that a lot of people, sort of the main things people associate with menopause is our bodies changing. And a lot of it is our bodies getting bigger. And I think just remembering that you don't get an award for being able to, wear the same size jeans that you wore in high school, and there's no documented health benefit to that. And that, we're going through this life, like with our bodies, in our bodies. They are going to show that our bodies are changed. Our bodies are going to get softer, and, not everyone's dues, but our bodies may be softer. They may be bigger. We may not be able to wear those clothes that we really liked. And, acknowledging that, grieving that, and also realizing that that doesn't define us, that is not the most important thing about us. But that's a message that we get a lot culturally, that it is like really not cool to have our bodies change, to have our skin change. And I think really holding on to the idea that it is okay to change, and we are not going to look like we did in our 20s, and we shouldn't expect to, because we've been using these bodies the whole time, and they've been doing a good job. So being, grieving it and really focus on being grateful for them taking us on this journey.
One thing I wanted to add to that, to all those beautiful things that you all just said, is one thing that's amazing about this time of life is that hopefully you just don't give an F as much. And I think that is a real thing that happens. Like, as along with all the uncertainty and like the societal messaging and the shoulds and all of that, is that we don't really care as much about what other people are thinking, and what we're thinking and what we're feeling becomes the focus. And that's the beautiful part. And it's not all the time and every moment, but I think we get more of those moments, and that's something to celebrate.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Out of fucks to give, totally.
I have been on the professed few F's given tour for the past 2.5 years. Started in 2019. I was very like all the time, like, I'm just going and doing whatever. I'm just gonna, and I wasn't having as many of these replete symptoms as I have been in the past 6 months or so. And I have had a resurgence of wanting to get back on that few F's given tour, because I think it's really important, because that's where we are now. That's where we are right now. That's, anybody who is going through this, or anybody who's about to go through this, just remember to be on your, tour, your own idea of what works best for you. Don't forget who you are, because a lot of times we get so stuck in, what we do or what other people think we should be doing and all of that. And we forget. And there's no harm. And I encourage all to take a minute and figure out, like, well, I'm good, but I could be better, because I remember this is something that I've always wanted to do. And I put a hold on it because I've been feeling all these things. I'm going to apologize in advance because my dog is coming towards me and he might bark. But it's a big thing, and we need to embrace and celebrate and get back on our few F's given tour.
I hate to interrupt, because this has been such a wonderful conversation to get to listen to, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time too, and we're a little past 7. So I wanted to thank you all for being here, and you're an amazing menopause. This has been so amazing to listen.
We're going on tour. We're going on world tour.
I think you should. World domination
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful to you for opening up this conversation and helping to bring it more to the mainstream, so that it's not a scary unknown for people to go into, and something that, as you've been saying all night, all of you, just something to embrace, and it's a rite of passage. And so thank you. You're all very inspiring to me. So to spend this time with you all.
Thank you. It was so nice to be here. It was really good to talk with all of you.
Definitely. Thank you.
So amazing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and are excited to see you again sometime soon. Bye everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.